This is suicide. John Wick. Come on, he's only one man. John Wick, the legendary Baba Yaga, has returned. This time he's tasked with hunting down another top-tier assassin, a lone female killer. She has stormed into a cult-controlled town and turned the entire place upside down. When these two deadly assassins face off, who will emerge victorious in the end? Our protagonist Eve lost her mother and sister mysteriously at the age of 4. Since then, she lived solely with her father, but her father was no ordinary man. He was a professional assassin. On this particular night, just after nightfall, numerous assassins emerged from the sea like ghosts. They swiftly and silently dispatched the guards outside the villa. Yet their subtle movements did not escape Eve's father. He immediately grabbed a smoke grenade nearby. With a fierce throw, he sent one intruder flying back. Rushing into the room, he instructed Eve to open the secret chamber and hide. Barely had Eve hidden herself when more assassins burst into the house. To protect his daughter, Eve's father had no choice but to face the enemies alone. Unfortunately, he wasn't a ruthless legend like John Wick. In no time, he revealed an opening and was pinned helplessly to the ground. Eve, hiding in the secret chamber, witnessed everything. At that moment, the enemy leader stepped forward from the smoke. He frowned deeply at the captured man on the ground. He reminded him of how the clan had trusted him, even promised him their daughter's hand in marriage. Yet all he repaid them with was betrayal. Now the leader declared, with the man's wife already dead, it was time for him to atone for his sins. The leader demanded to know where Eve was hiding. When Eve's father refused to speak, the leader took out a revolver, loaded it with a single bullet, and gave him a chilling ultimatum. If he took his own life, Eve would live. Otherwise, both father and daughter would die together. Seeing her father in danger, Eve rushed out of the secret chamber. She picked up the revolver and shot the enemy leader dead. Father and daughter had no time to comfort each other as more assassins stormed the house. Her father quickly grabbed Eve, smashed through a wall, and activated a timed explosive. As they fled toward the dock, a bullet pierced her father's abdomen. But determined to save his daughter, he gritted his teeth and pressed forward until they reached safety. An explosion roared behind them, reducing their home to rubble. But Eve's father, weakened by heavy blood loss, finally collapsed. With his final breath, he uttered a single word, "sorry," before falling lifelessly to the ground. The scene shifted to a police station. Eve sat quietly clutching a crystal ball left by her father. At this moment, Winston, the manager of the Continental Hotel, approached the grieving girl. "Your father was a good man. He wanted a free and open life for you." Winston explained that, entrusted by an old friend, he would find Eve a safe place. Soon, Eve was brought to a theater controlled by a Russian assassin organization, the Ruska Roma. A black woman stared silently at Eve as she was brought inside. When Eve entered the room, the woman questioned Winston if he knew who the child's parents were. Winston shook his head. Yet the clan's leader, known as the Director, sensed from Eve's eyes both ruthlessness and a desire for vengeance, qualities perfect for an assassin. Plus, Eve's father had done significant favors for Ruska Roma in the past. Thus, the Director agreed to take Eve in. As Winston departed, he gave Eve a gold coin used by assassins. It served as currency for their services, symbolizing identity and status. Its value was extraordinary. 12 years later, Eve had become the most determined female assassin trainee in the clan. Even when her feet were bloodied from intense ballet practice, she never asked to stop. Of course, a top assassin couldn't merely train in ballet. Combat skills and marksmanship were equally essential. Thus, Eve exerted maximum effort in these fields as well. Yet due to inherent physical differences between genders, Eve often found herself disadvantaged against male opponents. One day, after another failed sparring session, the Director confronted her. "Why did you fail? He's too strong. Do you really believe that strength has anything to do with whether you win or lose? You will always be weaker." These words immediately awakened Eve. She realized she shouldn't confront enemies on their strongest ground. Instead, she must leverage her flexibility, adaptability, and cunning. From that moment on, Eve quickly rose to become the best assassin trainee, unmatched even by male peers. But upon returning to her dormitory one day, Eve discovered her closest friend had disappeared. Upon asking, Eve learned that her friend lacked a tragic past, and thus was unsuited for life as a top assassin. Their paths were destined to diverge. Eve seized this moment to declare her wish to become a true assassin. The Director agreed, but informed Eve she must first pass one final test. Eve was brought into a small chamber. Shortly afterward, a battered woman was dragged in. Clearly a trainee who had failed. "Do you know who I am?" "No, I'm you in 10 years. In the next second, the woman began assembling a pistol. Eve immediately understood the test. She swiftly assembled her own weapon first. The woman, thinking Eve hesitated out of fear, relaxed briefly. But Eve's hesitation was merely an illusion. After all, Eve had killed a man at the age of 4. On the street afterward, Eve's heart was heavy as she gazed at her father's crystal ball. Suddenly, she heard a commotion downstairs. Peering down, Eve saw none other than the renowned John Wick. It turned out during John Wick 3, Parabellum Wick was being hunted by the High Table. He had sought Ruska Roma's protection. In return, he owed them a debt marked by a special brand. As Wick prepared to leave, Eve stopped him, asking how she could become like him. Wick replied she still had a choice to leave now. Then Wick turned and walked away. Soon after, Eve received her first mission to protect a wealthy girl. The girl's father feared enemies would kidnap his daughter, so he hired an assassin as her bodyguard. However, due to strict security measures, Eve could only use a 3D printed modified Glock pistol with hollow point bullets. Any danger she encountered would require her own ingenuity. As night fell, Eve dressed elegantly and entered a lively nightclub. Through the bustling crowd, she quickly spotted her target. But suddenly, several suspicious Asian men approached the girl. The leader among them matched the description in her mission briefing. Realizing danger was imminent, Eve removed her coat and charged forward. But this was her first real assignment, and she lacked Wick's ruthless efficiency. Caught off guard, Eve was soon surrounded and beaten by 3 men. She quickly regained her footing, realizing time was short. Eve grabbed a steel pipe and mercilessly struck her attackers in vulnerable spots. With the thugs dispatched, Eve pursued the leader and finally confronted him. After a brutal fight, Eve defeated the man, but chose to spare his life, remembering her mission was only protection, not assassination. Completing her task successfully, Eve officially joined Ruska Roma as a professional assassin. Tattooed with the symbol of a free angel, she began her deadly new career. 2 months later, Eve took a photo of a man she had just killed. Once again, she successfully completed her mission and received a generous commission. Stepping out of the room, Eve noticed several bodies scattered in the staircase. Calmly, she pulled out a throwing knife, entered the elevator, wiped the blood from her forehead, and casually walked through the crowd as if nothing had happened. But just as she was about to drive away, another vehicle suddenly rammed into her. Eve waited for the attackers to pause their gunfire, then decisively opened fire. She was almost ambushed again. After getting shot, Eve endured the pain and fatally wounded the attacker. Seeing him defenseless, Eve grabbed an axe and brutally finished him off. But as she turned away, she noticed a distinctive cross-shaped mark on the man's wrist. Eve immediately felt a chill. This mark was identical to the one worn by those who killed her father. Eve quickly returned to the theater carrying the man's severed hand. An elderly woman kindly reminded her that the bag was leaking. Eve thanked her, but the lady had no idea that the bag held a severed hand. Eve then threw the hand onto the director's desk, showing her the mark identical to her father's killers. Clearly, this symbol was significant. However, the director already knew about those people and had deliberately hidden the truth from Eve all these years to protect her. People with that mark, they have no rules, no consequence, no mercy. They do not interfere with our business, and we do not interfere with theirs. For years, both sides maintained a fragile peace written into an ancient agreement. The director warned Eve not to pursue them further, or she'd violate clan rules. Yet Eve, burdened by hatred, refused to let the matter rest. At dawn, she arrived at the Continental Hotel, a sanctuary for assassins. Violence was strictly forbidden here, and any violators faced severe punishment, including being hunted by the entire assassin community. Moreover, the hotel provided specialized services for assassins payable in assassin gold coins. Today, Eve came to see Winston. Winston wasn't surprised by Eve's arrival. Eve briefly explained her purpose, but Winston advised her that sometimes ignorance protected the ones under their care. He warned that seeking certain truths could alter her destiny drastically. Yet Eve showed him her assassin coin, leaving Winston no choice but to accept her request. Winston revealed the truth about that mysterious group. Technically, they were a cult isolated from civilized society. Even Winston couldn't pinpoint their exact location. However, the hotel monitored these people whenever they checked in. Coincidentally, a marked man named Payne recently checked into the Continental Hotel in Prague, room 315. Winston provided Eve with Payne's details. That night, Eve traveled to Prague, checked into room 314, and immediately attracted attention. A woman downstairs instructed a rooftop sniper to watch both Payne and Eve closely. As soon as Eve entered her room, she climbed into room 315 through the window. Upon entering, she spotted a trap set at the entrance, confirming that forced entry through the front door would have been disastrous. Suddenly, a girl appeared, startling Eve. The girl asked if Eve intended to harm her father. Just then, Eve heard the cocking of a gun behind her. Payne emerged, ordering his daughter back and questioning Eve's intentions. Eve explained her tragic childhood and demanded information about her father's killers. Meanwhile, the woman downstairs received a message from the sniper and raised Payne's bounty to 4 million. Immediately, the assassins downstairs received notifications. Ignoring hotel rules, some assassins decided to attack anyway. Payne informed Eve that her actions endangered them all. He told her that the people she sought were already nearby, waiting for someone to break the hotel's rules. Moments later, gunfire erupted as assassins stormed their location. Payne seized the opportunity and fled with his daughter. The woman downstairs immediately mobilized her forces. Eve wrestled fiercely with a female assassin. She smashed a glass bottle into the woman's head, but mindful of hotel rules, she refrained from killing. After knocking out her opponent, Eve picked up a gun and quickly reunited with Payne. Realizing they needed Eve's help to escape, Payne offered a deal. If Eve helped his daughter escape, he would tell her the location of the cult. Eve agreed without hesitation. Payne distracted the attackers while Eve took the girl to safety. But seconds later, Eve and the girl witnessed Payne being shot. Before Eve could react, she was knocked unconscious from behind, and the girl, Ella, was kidnapped. As Eve blacked out, she glimpsed the leather-clad woman behind the assault. Meanwhile, cult leader Morgan sighed with relief upon hearing his granddaughter Ella was safely retrieved. Eve and 2 other assassins were restrained by Continental Security for breaking hotel rules. The manager, ruthless towards violators, ordered the other 2 executed immediately. Eve narrowly escaped death, but was forced to check out immediately. She then went to a weapons shop owned by an old acquaintance known as Old Black. Offering an assassin coin, Eve asked for intel on the cult. Old Black didn't want trouble and initially refused. Eve calmly asked for powerful weapons instead. Old Black showed her a hidden room filled with advanced weapons. Suddenly, gunfire erupted, forcing them to hide. The guns in the room were empty, making them useless. Eve rushed to another room and discovered a case of grenades. She threw one, injuring herself slightly in the blast. Searching for an escape, she found another locked room. After blowing open the door, Eve finally obtained usable weapons. Returning, she found Old Black had dealt with the attackers. Furious at the shop's destruction, Old Black revealed the cult's general location, but told Eve she'd have to find the exact place herself. He even provided Eve a vehicle. Eve soon arrived at the coordinates, a snow-covered town unmarked on any map. The serene scenery masked deadly threats. The moment Eve entered the town, many eyes turned toward her. Just then, the director called, urging her to abandon her mission immediately before greater troubles arose. But Eve refused, determined to reach the truth. Distracted, she nearly hit a pedestrian. While stopping abruptly, she noticed a music box identical to one her father once gave her. She realized she'd found the right place. At that moment, a suspicious SUV pulled up outside. Eve calmly ordered a coffee, preparing herself for the confrontation. As the man outside drew his gun, Eve dove under a table, exchanging fire. Eve deliberately made a false sound of reloading, tricking the attacker into charging. Eve seized a fork, stabbing him brutally in the neck. After disarming him, they grappled violently. Eve grabbed a kerosene lamp, smashed it over his head, then pinned him down fiercely. Meanwhile, a waitress secretly alerted the authorities. Eve gouged out the attacker's eye, causing him to scream in pain. Eve fled upstairs but encountered the waitress brandishing a knife. Clearly trained, the waitress fought viciously, injuring Eve multiple times. Eve tried calming her down, but the woman became more aggressive. As the waitress reached for a gun, Eve kicked her forcefully, causing her to miss. The waitress retreated into a cold storage room. Eve trapped her inside with a food tray. Before she could catch her breath, an armed mob had gathered outside. It became clear every adult in town was hostile. Eve tied a kitchen knife to her pistol, improvising a melee weapon. After an intense struggle, Eve finally escaped the cafe. But her desperate sprint caught the watchtower's attention, triggering town-wide alarms. Residents hurriedly sheltered their children as armed locals flooded the streets hunting Eve. Battling exhaustion, Eve killed numerous attackers, but was eventually overwhelmed. Falling to the ground exhausted, she looked up to see the leather-clad woman approach, recognizing Eve's Ruska Roma tattoo. Later, Morgan confronted Eve bound to a chair. He said her solo invasion was equivalent to declaring war. Eve insisted her actions had nothing to do with Ruska Roma. Morgan then revealed Ella was his granddaughter, destined to inherit his empire. Eve was horrified Morgan would hunt his own family. In fury, she revealed how Morgan's men murdered her father years ago. Morgan finally recognized Eve as the escaped girl from long ago and told the leather-clad woman, Anna, that Eve was her long-lost sister. Gunfire suddenly erupted. Morgan rushed back, finding Eve freed, and Anna having betrayed him to protect Eve. The sisters fled, pursued by Morgan's men. Reaching a small cabin, Anna tried awakening Eve's memories of their shared past. She explained their father had taken Eve away, hoping she'd live normally, but their mother had died due to his betrayal. Outside, Morgan ordered his men to eliminate both sisters. Moments later, grenades exploded, destroying the cabin completely. Eve barely survived the explosion, but Anna lay gravely injured. In her final moments, Anna gazed lovingly at Eve before passing away. Seeing her sister's lifeless body, Eve's long-suppressed rage erupted completely. She swore vengeance against everyone responsible. Grabbing a samurai sword, Eve unleashed her wrath, cutting down every enemy entering the burning remains of the cabin. She shouted a threat towards Morgan, promising relentless revenge as long as she lived. Terrified, Morgan immediately called the director, demanding Eve's elimination before midnight, or else war would erupt between the two factions. With no other option, the director reluctantly agreed. Late at night, a train stopped at the town station. John Wick slowly stepped onto the platform. Morgan, satisfied, ordered his men to leave Wick alone. Wick followed Eve's trail, leading him directly to a church. Seeing Wick, Eve's body trembled slightly. Wick advised Eve she could still turn back, but Eve, driven by vengeance, refused. She attacked fiercely, but Wick's skill, especially his bulletproof suit, was unmatched. Before Eve could even reload, Wick aimed his gun at her head. Wick intentionally held back, otherwise Eve would have been dead already. Seeing Eve repeatedly stand up defiantly, Wick finally chose hand-to-hand combat. As they grappled, Eve cried out that Morgan killed her father, begging Wick to let her complete her revenge. With less than half an hour until midnight, Wick reconsidered and finally relented. Soon after, Eve silently infiltrated the town, swiftly eliminating the guards. She attached grenades to a dead body, then threw it down, causing a massive explosion. Morgan immediately rallied all townspeople to pursue Eve. Eve fought fiercely, using ice skates, blades, and guns, cutting down anyone in her way. Eventually, she discovered an arsenal filled with powerful weapons. Morgan, increasingly nervous, deployed his elite forces to hunt her down. Eve faced overwhelming odds, but her new weapon, a devastating flamethrower, quickly turned the battle. Her fiery assault annihilated Morgan's men. Just then, the elite captain confronted Eve using a flamethrower of his own. Both unleashed massive torrents of fire, lighting up the sky. During the brutal confrontation, Eve gained the upper hand. However, the captain ignited his own leg, charging recklessly at her. Eve, surprised by the desperate attack, retreated to higher ground. From above, she systematically destroyed every remaining opponent. As Morgan learned of his losses, panic overcame him. Realizing defeat was imminent, he decided to flee with Ella. Meanwhile, Eve ran out of fuel in her flamethrower. Just as she was deciding her next move, the captain reappeared. Eve quickly hid inside a nearby room, noticing fire sprinklers overhead. Unable to counter fire directly, she turned on the water, turning the tables. Eve rushed onto the street, spraying water into the captain's flamethrower, creating massive clouds of smoke and steam. Although Eve temporarily prevailed, the powerful recoil knocked her down. As the captain aimed his weapon to finish her off, Wick appeared, gun blazing, swiftly eliminating the remaining threats. Nearby, Eve blocked Morgan's escape route. As Morgan's car approached, Eve opened fire, forcing it to stop. Before the driver could resist, Eve swiftly dispatched him. Morgan stepped out, coldly confronting Eve. He mockingly declared Eve could never break the cycle, claiming her attempt to rescue Ella was meaningless, since violence and vengeance were in their blood. Yet as Morgan continued, Eve decisively shot him dead, rejecting his fatalistic ideology. Eve trusted herself more than fate. Honoring Payne's wish, she successfully rescued Ella from the madness. Wick, relieved having cleared remaining threats, received a call from the director. When asked if Eve was dead, Wick simply replied Morgan was. The director seemed unsurprised. Days later, Eve safely reunited Ella with Payne at the Continental Hotel. Meanwhile, the director, returning to her office, immediately noticed the crystal ball on her desk. Elsewhere, Eve watched her friend's ballet performance. Soon after, both the Continental Hotel and Assassin Networks issued a bounty on Eve's head. Countless assassins now hunted her. The story ends here. Ballerina, as a spin-off of the John Wick series, explores the violent yet stylish world of assassins through a distinctively female perspective. Like a specially mixed cocktail, it retains the iconic flavor of the original series while adding new, unique ingredients. Judging from the portrayal of female characters, the film aims to break traditional gender constraints typical in action movies. The female characters surrounding Eve, whether mentors or allies, are far more than mere decorations. Each has her own complicated background and motivations, collectively creating a powerful representation of female assassins. The film suggests that in this deadly world, women are no longer mere accessories to men, but protagonists who can control their destinies and rewrite the rules. However, despite these strengths, the movie also has noticeable shortcomings. The antagonist's motives remain unclear, seemingly existing only to present obstacles for Eve. This weakens the logic and coherence of the overall plot. In conclusion, Ballerina shines brightly in certain areas, yet clearly shows its flaws. It undoubtedly brings fresh energy into the Wick universe, yet substantial room remains for improvement, especially regarding character development and narrative logic. That's all for today's video. Thank you all for watching. Your likes, comments, and subscriptions are the greatest encouragement. See you next time.